As we saw in the Beacon broadcast yesterday, the doctrine of justification by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, does away with any further discrimination between Jew and Gentile. Though there was such a discrimination erected and maintained by God Himself for several hundred years for particular purposes of His own, all such differences have now been erased with the coming of Christ and the ushering in of the new covenant. The middle wall of partition between Jew and Gentile has been broken down, and anyone, Jew, Gentile, black, white, red or yellow, rich or poor, no matter who he is, male or female, slave or free, educated, uneducated, cultured or barbarian, whoever trusts in Jesus Christ by faith for justification, for salvation, will be saved regardless of what his background is, regardless of what his heritage is, regardless of what his previous religion may have been. There is no longer any discrimination. And that's what Paul is getting at in the words of Romans chapter 3, in verses 29 and 30, when he says, "Or is God the God of Jews only? Is He not the God of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also, if indeed God is one. And He will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through faith." And that's what the doctrine of justification by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone emphasizes. Which it is the commonality of all men in their sinfulness. All are equally sinners. Paul has taken 3 chapters virtually to prove that. There is no difference in man's sinful condition. There is no difference in man's standing of condemnation before a holy God. Doesn't matter whether you're Jew or Gentile. Doesn't matter into which family you were born. You are a sinner, condemned, justly condemned by a holy God. But God's way of salvation is also non-discriminatory. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile. All who trust in Christ are justified, regardless of what their background may be. Now, Paul expected Jews to object to this teaching, and they're the ones I think that he has in mind here, because they're going to start protesting that they do have a corner on God. They do have certain significant advantages, that God is the God of Jews and not of Gentiles, or at the very least, He is the God of Jews in a way that He is not the God of Gentiles. God has made the Jews His special people in a way that He has not made Gentiles. So let's not go sweeping all this away. Even Jews who had come to embrace Jesus as the Christ, their Messiah, still had trouble with this. They still wanted to cling to the idea that Jesus, after all, was the Jewish Messiah, and there still is a great spiritual advantage to Jewishness. It might be okay for Gentiles to be saved, but they're always going to have to see themselves as second-tier Christians on a different level with we Jews. For after all, the promises were made to the Jews, and the Messiah, Jesus, is a Jew. He came in fulfillment of the promises made to the Jewish people. These were Jewish promises. These were Jewish covenants. And the Messiah is a Jewish Messiah. And if the Gentiles are going to get in on this, then they are going to have to recognize the superiority of the Jews. And they're going to have to show gratitude to the Jews. And they're going to have to receive their spiritual benefits as some kind of a spillover, sort of like the crumbs that fall off the master's table. But it's the Jews who get to sit down at the banqueting table. That's the attitude a lot of Jews had in Paul's day. Virtually all Jews had that attitude in Paul's day. And that's the attitude that even some Christians of Jewish heritage had in Paul's day. So Paul is going to argue against that in teaching that a proper understanding of the biblical doctrine of justification allows for no such discrimination. And he begins by talking about the nature of God, the oneness of God. Verse 29, "Or is God the God of Jews only? Is He not the God of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also." Now what is Paul saying here? Let's follow his argument. Well, he is reminding the Jews of their central Jewish doctrine, namely that God is one God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord, Deuteronomy 6:4. Which means, Paul is arguing, that there is only one true God in all the universe. There is only one true God. Right? And the Jews wouldn't object to that. They wouldn't say, oh no, there are many true gods, but Israel's God, Jehovah, is the king of the gods. There are many legitimate gods, but our God is the best God, the biggest God, the highest God. No, they wouldn't say that. They would agree there's only one God. That's the whole point. A central Jewish doctrine. There is only one God. The pagan nations of the world who were worshiping multiple gods and their polytheism were absolutely wrong, and every Jew would insist on that. You are wrong to believe that there are many gods. There's only one God. All right? That's what Paul is teaching. And what he's